the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm now joined by 991, the Sports Animals, Josh Ward. Josh, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Doing great. Great to talk to you.
Thank you for being here. I always love that when you do these, you got the Josh and Swain behind you in the studio. It feels like this is like Josh and Swain extra. Like this is Josh and Swain plus. So for some additional Josh Ward coverage right after the show, you can come here.
For sure. Although I'm sure a lot of folks tuning in are thinking, this is the worst half of what I'm looking for. Give me a little more Swain, a little less Josh would probably be the response from a lot of folks. I would understand if so.
No, you got to have one. You can't have one without the other. It's a peanut butter and jelly situation. You got to have both. And it works. And I love Josh and Swain, and you do a great job Monday through Friday over there on the Sports Animal. But we have to start here, I think, at the top before we get into your Raiders and some Tennessee Vols stuff here, Josh, is Rickey Gibson planning to enter the transfer portal, it being reported this afternoon. What's your immediate reaction to that?
Surprise. I did not anticipate this one. In fact, with Rickey Gibson, a lot of the conversation has been about his importance with Jermod McCoy suffering the torn ACL and his status at the start of the season being an unknown, and really how he's going to play all season long coming back from that knee injury. My guess is that when Jermod is back, he'll play at a high level and get better as the season goes along. But that adds to the importance of somebody like Rickey Gibson. Now, that also adds to his negotiating power. And in the world that we're in college football, we can never be totally 100% surprised by anybody entering the transfer portal or considering doing so in this case, because he's not in there. But that is the report right now, that is Rickey Gibson's plan. So it's easy to kind of connect the two, that there is a need at corner for Tennessee. Rickey Gibson's value then rises, which also might show his interest in looking elsewhere if somebody's willing to pay him more than Tennessee is. And maybe something changes there. Tennessee could come back and say, okay, what do you need to stay? That's why it's an ongoing story to pay attention to, because Tennessee needed, I think, some help at corner with Rickey Gibson staying. If he were to leave, that really increases Tennessee's need to go find somebody after the spring.
And they've done it before. I mean, Kamal Hadden is probably your best spring portal ad in the Heupel era. He came in late and obviously had a really solid overall career at corner for Tennessee. But maybe there's a Kamal Hadden out there. But I think it's just kind of the new age of you kind of touched on this, of just college athletics. Is you just never know day to day who might pop in, who might not, who's going to stay, who's not. Even when you think it's all pretty close to being wrapped up, there's always a surprise, and we still have a more portal window to get through. And it's just, this is kind of that early reminder that we're not necessarily all settled here, and who you're planning on seeing in the fall for Tennessee is maybe not set in stone. But I will say, from Rickey's side, it makes all the sense in the world to do this now. He's got so much leverage with Tennessee right now, because he and Jermod played 60 to 70 snaps a game. They don't really rotate at corner at Tennessee. You have a situation where Jermod is out, and we'll see if he's available for those first couple of weeks of the season. You hope he's ready to go opening day, but if not, so like you said, it's a whole lot more pressure on Rickey, that you really, really need Rickey Gibson, who was really good last year in a starting role. And then, I mean, there's just not a lot of depth behind it. Proven depth, we should say. I mean, Jordan Matthews gone in the portal, so you don't have him to turn to if Rickey goes. He's got all the leverage in the world to be like, look, man, y'all got to take care of me, because I know my value now. My value has increased over the last couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, Jordan Matthews, you mentioned him. When he decided to leave and he goes to Vanderbilt, he was one of the names I mentioned when I said, don't just dismiss that because he was a backup, because backups matter. If we're going to talk about depth mattering in football, you can't just look at second team guys and say, oh, who cares if they left? Because you might end up needing those guys. You hope not to the point that we're maybe discussing right now. And maybe somebody else emerges. One of those young corners is going to get a real opportunity if Rickey Gibson leaves. Watching the cornerbacks this spring was already on the to-do list because of Jermod's injury. And then again, the question around Rickey Gibson increases there. Adding Jalen McMurray last year, I think, helped the defensive backfield, and he for sure will get a bigger opportunity as we go through the rest of the offseason, looking ahead to the start of this upcoming fall. And we'll see about those younger players. But Rickey Gibson's value just went up, and that's just college football right now because everybody's either a free agent or operates on a player option.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it is. You have the option at any point. That can be during the winter, during the spring. So you get multiple free agent windows. You can transfer to a school and then decide to transfer somewhere else. In fact, Kamal Hadden, you mentioned his name, had planned to go to Auburn, and then he decides, well, I'm going to go somewhere else, and he ends up at Tennessee, and that worked out for the Volunteers. So Tennessee could find somebody else. Again, I think Tennessee was already planning to at least look at the market of cornerbacks. But if Rickey Gibson leaves, they have to. They have to go find somebody to come in and help.
Final thing on this. I wonder if he does happen, which I'm still going to bet on. I'm going to say it's over 50% he stays. I feel like this is a leverage situation. I think Tennessee finds a way to keep Rickey Gibson. That being said, if Rickey's out, I wonder if you move Boo Carter down. Like, I wonder if Boo has more value, because, I mean, you already have the Travis Hunter stuff popping up anyway. Like, if Boo Carter is serious about playing both ways and Tennessee is serious about acquiescing, is there more value in Boo getting a lot more snaps at corner, and you figure it out with Jordan Thomas, Christian Charles, Caleb Beasley or something at star, and you let Boo play opposite of Dermott and see if Boo can be a every down cornerback and then also getting snaps in the slot for Tennessee. I wonder if Boo's involved in any of this a little bit.
He has to factor in terms of what Tennessee staff talks about with their options. Again, in the conversation of if Rickey Gibson leaves Tennessee, I don't know. Maybe so. You mentioned Jordan Thomas. What exactly is his status? Where is he physically coming back from the injury he suffered a year ago? That's going to factor in as well. But Boo Carter is one of the best athletes on the team and already was going to be important in the secondary. This might change what Tennessee decides to do with either him, with Caleb Beasley. This would strengthen probably the need to look at him again at corner. A safety could be an option for him or inside. So they've got some guys that they can move around, and that's part of what spring practice will be, is looking at different players in different positions, especially some of those young players who will get more of an opportunity, because young guys are going to be expected to need to step up. I think Idris Farouk at safety is an important player this offseason as well, a second-year guy who I think is a good athlete and the coaching staff likes a lot. Let's see how confident the coaches are in some of these young players to see how ready they are.
Absolutely. Switching gears here, the Las Vegas Raiders. You're a big Raiders guy, Josh. It's a little weird. Pete Carroll, seeing him today doing a presser in Raiders gear. You have Chip Kelly in Raiders gear. Imagine explaining to the college football fan in 2009 that Chip Kelly and Pete Carroll will be coaching the Raiders together in Las Vegas in the year of 2025. Has it set in for you? And then the other added element is, like, Tom Brady's like reportedly calling the shots here. So Tom Brady is a main figurehead with the Las Vegas Raiders, and Pete Carroll is your head coach, and Chip Kelly is your offensive coordinator. That's a lot of drastic big name change for the Raiders, Josh. Are you excited?
I am, compared to where things have been the last few years. I think Tennessee. I think the Raiders. They at least have professionals, guys that, at least in what they've done previously, know what it takes to win based on their experience. Obviously, what Tom Brady did as a quarterback, and then Pete Carroll. He won a Super Bowl, played for multiple Super Bowls. He's run big time franchises. He was a part of the greatness of USC, despite some of the NCAA stuff. I don't even really care about that. He was a winner there. So having somebody come in, or even if it's a few years, because he's not young, everybody recognizes that, but he acts like it. Yeah. And maybe he has a new life, a little life added after spending the year away from the game, essentially being let go by the Seattle Seahawks and saying, okay, I've got one more shot to add to what I can say my career was as an NFL head coach. I think Chip Kelly's a very good addition as an OC. A few years ago, we were talking about, could he get another shot as an NFL head coach one day? So he's an OC coming in. They've got to upgrade the roster. They've got to figure out the quarterback position. They have to be better at a lot of spots. They're not where they need to be. The roster, though, was probably better than what the results were at different times. So if they can figure out the quarterback position and get the quarterback a little bit more help, they could win. Another big problem is the division they're in. The Chiefs aren't going away. The Chargers are going to improve. And Bo Nix has breathed a little life into the Denver Broncos with Sean Payton. So the Raiders are in the worst spot for sure in the AFC West.
But you also have Pete Carroll, who I'm sure I wanted to see Jim Harbaugh's face when he learned that Pete Carroll was taking the Raiders job.
They're back together. They can't quit each other.
They cannot. And Pete Carroll, I'm sure that's part of it. He's a competitor. There's no way the man who chews his gum at 99 miles an hour is not fired up about competing with Jim Harbaugh and keeping him from getting over the hump in the AFC West over the next couple of years. And like you said, a lot of it's quarterback. I mean, I think Brock Bowers probably should have been your rookie of the year this year. I mean, he was, for the full calendar year, I think more valuable in what he did at tight end. I mean, he was an all-pro, one of the best tight ends in football right away. Jaden Daniels had a really good year, but Jaden Daniels was not one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL this year. Like, Brock Bowers was immediately one of the best tight ends in football, and it was just a plug-and-play situation. But tight ends are never going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. That's never going to happen. But I mean, there are some pieces here, Josh, and I don't know, the quarterback thing. I mean, do you want Shador? Do you want Cam Ward? Do you want them to punt on this year? Because you kind of did that last year with Gardner Minshew and company, and that got ugly with Aiden O'Connell and the musical chairs there. I mean, you had my old friend Desmond Ridder in there for a little bit. I mean, do you want that for another year? Do you want Russell Wilson to get the gang back together all together in the Silver and Black? Because that's, I believe, where he actually wanted to go early on when those trade rumors were popping up in Seattle years ago. What say you about the quarterbacks? What do you want them to do?
I just want the Raiders to get it right because that's been so difficult. And
Yeah.
I did not think the Gardner Minshew was going to be any kind of answer. I've jokingly called Aiden O'Connell, who was a guy that completely fell under the radar. I called him New Tom for a little while. I said, hey, this is going to be the next Tom Brady, a guy that everybody slept on and he's going to take off. And I was joking. It's kind of funny that Tom Brady's now there with the Raiders organization. So I could talk myself into Sam Darnold. I could talk myself into one of the rookies in Shador or Cam Ward during this past season when Shador was tweeting out, thank you, God, or something like that after each Raiders loss, and it got some attention of maybe that's where he wants to go. I started to hop on board that idea. I was like, all right, let's ride with the Sanders crew. So I can talk myself into any option. It's such a crapshoot, and it's difficult to know. So many people a year ago thought Caleb Williams has to be the number one guy. And then Jaden Daniels is a good choice at number two. But at one point, there was a Jaden Daniels, Drake May debate, who should be the number two guy. And what happens long-term is very much to be determined. But coming out of year one, Jaden Daniels has the highest approval rating, I think, of those three guys. So, again, nobody truly knows most of the time. And I think this is one of those cases. So you could paint a picture where Cam Ward has a great career, Shador Sanders has a great career, or it never really works out for either guy to be what you want that high of a draft pick to be. And the Raiders are number 6, so something might have to give there. But Sam Darnold makes a lot of sense as a shorter-term option because he's probably not taking the Raiders as far as they want to go, which is back to competing for Super Bowls. But they're also not in a position to help whoever's there at quarterback to compete for Super Bowls anytime soon. So Darnold, or a guy that's there for 2 to 3 seasons to bring some stability back to what they're doing and waiting to find a young future quarterback, that right now makes the most sense.
I love it. Josh, when it comes to whether or not Tennessee feels like a 1 seed to you, with the schedule, what you've seen from Florida, what you've seen from Alabama down the stretch, we'll get a big-time matchup on Saturday, obviously, between the Vols and the Tide with Dick Vitale on the call. But what say you? Does it feel like this is a 1 seed worthy team, or do you see why right now Alabama and Florida are ahead of Tennessee in the 1 through 6 pecking order to get one of those 4 final spots?
Well, Tennessee feels like it's competitive and should be in that conversation with 9 quad 1 wins this season, playing such a tough schedule. When you combine the non-conference and everything that's there in the SEC, of course, what Tennessee is playing in the SEC applies to Alabama. This final stretch for the Crimson Tide in the last 3 weeks of the season is absurd in what Alabama faces. Florida has the most impressive win, I guess, in college basketball, winning at Auburn, considering Auburn's the number 1 overall team. Tennessee and Florida split. They both blew each other out at home. So right now, the case for Alabama, the case for Florida against Tennessee makes a lot of sense. If Tennessee can beat Alabama, and let's see how things play out in the final week, but Bama has to play Florida and Auburn. That's really tough. And if Tennessee can get a head-to-head win, the Vols have a really good case against Alabama. If Tennessee loses at home against Alabama, I'm not sure what the argument would really end up being. Florida's schedule is a little softer in how things will play out. Houston's also there, and Houston's a really good team. So I think Tennessee is a top 6 team. If Tennessee wins out, there isn't much of an argument. Then I think Tennessee needs to be a number 1 seed. If Tennessee beats Alabama, loses at Ole Miss, let's see what Alabama does in its other games, because part of the argument against Tennessee would be, well, it's at home. So if it's a close game. So I don't know, but I am of the opinion in the argument, do you want to be the 4th 1 seed or the top 2 seed? You want to be the 1 seed. Even if Tennessee has to go out west, that should be the preference, I think, as opposed to being the 2 seed in the East against Duke. I'd rather take my chances out west in San Francisco.
Yeah, I don't want any part of the Duke matchup if that's where Tennessee goes. I mean, I think
Tennessee could win that game. If I can avoid Cooper Flagg, I'll avoid Cooper Flagg. He's a terrific player, and they're a really good team. Tennessee, again, could beat Duke and would have a really good chance, but I'd probably favor Duke going into that game, and I'd like to avoid them until I have to play them.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think Tennessee, with where Lunardi and the standings are right now, they need some help. Even if they went out, I mean, they still got Ole Miss, who is going to be a challenge. Ole Miss on the road, I think will be. Tennessee has to win out. I think is just part of the deal. Like winning at A&M was huge, but it feels like they're going to have to win out. And I think even if they do, you mentioned Houston catching fire here down the stretch is not helping Tennessee, because it feels like now you're only going to get 2 SEC teams as 1 seed. So that room gets a little bit smaller in terms of how many SEC teams get in there, the top spot. And even if you beat Alabama, I just feel like Florida, you mentioned their soft schedule. I think you need Florida to drop 1 too. I think you can't have Florida run the table here down the stretch as well, because even if you beat Alabama, I think Florida would get that final 1 seed over Tennessee if both went out. So I think Tennessee needs a little bit of help, but I also think what helps Tennessee is that they have the easiest schedule of those 3 SEC teams down the stretch. So they just need a little luck.
Yeah, if winning out is the requirement, then that's really tough. Yeah. I agree with you. Going to Ole Miss is going to be difficult. South Carolina at home should be an automatic win, considering the conversation we're having right now.
And tonight on the road at LSU late.
Yeah, it's a reminder of the conversation about Tennessee basketball, though. The fact that we're having this argument, well, should Tennessee be the 1 seed or the top 2 seed, or at worst, a top 6 team going into the NCAA tournament? This streak that Tennessee's on of high-level play, not just being in the top 25, I think the number's at 76 straight weeks, but spending a lot of that being ranked, but spending a lot of that time being in the top 5 or top 10 is a reminder of what this program has done, the amount of big games that they've played, the amount of big games that they've won. We talk about that with Tennessee basketball. Chaz Lanier had faced criticism from Tennessee fans, and then he goes out and puts up one of the top road performances we've seen in the SEC in the last 2 decades, and his SEC Player of the Week. And then Zakai Ziegler, what he's continued to do is incredible. So if Tennessee ends up as a 1 seed, it's another mark on this historical run of UT basketball. If Tennessee ends up as a 2 seed, it still is a reminder of the position that Tennessee is in, where it's consistently competing for one of the top seeds in the NCAA tournament and winning some of the biggest games that they play every single season.
Final thing, we'll get you out of here, Josh. Player from the 2024 Vols football team that you think the Vols will miss the most in 25 will be who?
Player from last year's team that they'll miss the most in 2025? Well, I'm probably choosing between Dylan Sampson and Cooper Mays. So Sampson can be replaced by a group. There's not going to be one player that does what he did this past season. I'm confident in saying that. But could the collection of Peyton Lewis and Deshaun Bishop and Star Thomas, and then let's see, Morris, the freshman, does he factor in? Could they collectively have success that's comparable to Dylan? I'm sure, based on what this offense is and how they've had a number of running backs succeed. So I think the answer is probably Cooper Mays. James Pierce Jr. is probably the highest draft pick, a projected first rounder, if not right outside the first round. But he's more replaceable with what that position group is. So I would lean Cooper Mays at center, knowing how valuable he was over the last few years.
Yeah, I'm just also, maybe this is foolish on my end, Josh, but I am just excited that Ellerby's going to have to play a high school recruit here at center going into next year, because Andre Carrick lost his appeal, because now we have it. There's no hiding. There's no 4 transfers on the offensive line in 25. No, sorry. You've got it. William Satterwhite, Max Anderson, Jesse Perry. I don't care who it is, but it makes spring and summer so much more fascinating because it's a big thing. And I mean, Cooper was great for Tennessee for 4 years, Josh, but Cooper also started as a redshirt freshman. Like, Cooper had to learn on the job. He learned young, and by playing him as a redshirt freshman, he was able to grow and become one of Tennessee's best leaders and most consistent players. You have to do that at some point. Like, if you're going to spend this money on these high school offensive linemen, they have to play at some point. And I'm excited. Like, I'm excited that it's going to be some combination of these new guys because they got to do it. Like, at some point, you can't just keep putting Band-Aids on this offensive line year over year, and you got to develop some of these guys you're bringing in.
Yeah, you're right. Fans have been waiting to see a high school offensive lineman develop to the point that he belongs on the field. Let's see that guy belongs on the field, because if they have problems at center, they are going to have problems with the offense, with what Tennessee wants to do. I mean, that applies to really anybody. You don't want to waste what you have in Nico, and he needs to be better this year. He's going to try to take a step forward as a player, talking about Nico Iamaleava. But if they're not protecting him, and we can talk about guys making plays on the outside too, because that's a factor, but they've got to protect. They've got to they had something they really trusted in Cooper Mays. And when he was out during the early part of the 2023 season, that was felt. So replacing him is a big deal, and somebody needs to emerge this spring.
I'm here for it though. It's gonna be fun stuff, Josh. I'm gonna be like my wife's like, what's going on? I'm like, hey, Satterwhite's pulled ahead here in mid-May. Like, Satterwhite's pulled ahead at the center position, and she's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, look, it's a long story. Josh Ward, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at 991 The Sports Animal and the newsletter?
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. So Swain and I are live 12 to 3 Monday through Friday on the Sports Animal. We're on in the Tri-Cities each day as well on the Sports Monster up there. You can podcast the show anywhere you get your podcasts, and that newsletter. You can sign up at joshandswain.com. It's free. It goes out once a week, every Friday morning, just kind of covering some of the big topics of the week and sharing some of the conversations we had. So joshandswain.com if anybody wants to sign up for that.
Go do it. I subscribe, and it's a great Friday morning read. I love getting it in my inbox on Friday. So, Josh,
that's cool. Thank you.
Absolutely. Keep up the great work, my friend, and we'll have to check back in again very soon.
Chase, thanks as always. I appreciate it.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.